Hello rugby fans and welcome back to Rugby Today on FloRugby. We're just going to have a little dive into some rather major rugby news, and that is of course that Scott Robertson has stood down as All Blacks head coach. Doesn't really feel like it's something he wanted to do, feels more like something that comes on the heels of the review that was launched by New Zealand Rugby, and it appeared like there was some sort of scathing feedback by players, namely from RD Sevilla. That was the big name that was rolling around, that it just wasn't a happy camp under Scott Robertson. Now, Robertson's start to life with the All Blacks was a little bit tumultuous. He has seen some assistants step aside, namely Leon MacDonald, which was just a bit of a weird move at the time that not many people would have seen coming. It happened while the All Blacks were in South Africa, not really at an ideal time before some rugby championship matches. That was then obviously followed by Jason Holland departing the setup. So quite a bit of turmoil in terms of the coaching setup there, and it was never really clarified exactly why those coaches left, other than sort of a difference in opinions with Robertson. Now, Robertson's time as All Blacks coach can't really be classed as a disaster. I mean, he did win 20 out of 27 test matches, so not the worst return in all time, but of course the All Blacks always expect more and expect perfection. But for New Zealand watchers of this video, I'd love to hear in the comments below, is Robertson being sort of hard done by here? Is this sort of, an accumulation of sort of factors below Robertson that's leading to this, in terms of maybe the talent pool isn't quite there? I mean, you never really want to be the coach that takes over an all-time dynasty. I mean, Ian Foster had a lot of battles on his hands when he took over from Steve Hansen, of course, on that side of things. And it was really at the tail end of that All Blacks dynasty, and Robertson obviously kind of came in and inherited a squad that didn't have Aaron Smith and Richie Mo'unga, so that's the halfback partnership that started the World Cup final. There was obviously Brodie Retallick gone, Sam Whitelock gone, and tons of other key players. Obviously Sam Cane was there for a little bit, but not really all that long. So a transition was always kind of to be expected for Robertson in this one. So did he deserve more time? I'd love to hear from All Blacks fans whether that was the case and sort of the feeling within New Zealand rugby. But what is done is done. Robertson will depart with just about 2 years to go to a World Cup. And of course, that monster series in South Africa, the greatest rivalry series where the All Blacks will face the Boks 4 times, and of course take on their URC franchises. So that's plenty of excitement for New Zealand rugby fans to look forward to, and I'd love to hear who you think should be the next head coach. So sort of a two-pronged question there. So far, the early front-runner sounds to be Jamie Joseph, who by all accounts could well have been the All Blacks coach previously and should have probably been in the running before. But obviously there was a big clamouring for Scott Robertson due to his success at Super Rugby level, which is understandable, but perhaps in the modern day rugby, club rugby, success doesn't necessarily generate international success. Obviously the games have really split in two in that side of things and how different demands are on that side. Other names that have been thrown about, of course, Joe Schmidt. Now, how that would work with his Wallaby commitments really recently is an interesting one. And of course, Schmidt has that family dynamic where he wants to be closer to home. And sure, coaching the All Blacks with his family living in New Zealand makes a lot of sense. But as anyone who watches Test rugby knows, Test teams are on the road a heck of a lot. And as we've said again, they're going to be going to South Africa for those 4 Test series plus those other matches. Then they're going to have that European tour. So it's quite a high pressure environment on the road, quite a lot. So I'm not sure how much Schmidt wants to jump into that, having stepped back from the Wallabies for that exact reason of wanting to be home. So those were the top 2 names on that side of things. Tony Brown was obviously doing wonders with the Springboks. Could Jamie Joseph maybe pry him away from there and get the old band back together? Who knows? It would be very interesting. And of course, that kind of feels like what the All Blacks need. When you look at the talent there is plenty of talent for this All Blacks team to get right back up there. But the ship, for me at this stage before the 2027 World Cup, possibly has sailed, in that the Boks are so far advanced in their development. But never say never on that side of things. Obviously there's France there, Ireland, England. There's plenty of contenders for that next World Cup. So it's not a foregone conclusion that the Boks will go for a three-peat. But if you were looking at it sort of logically now, you kind of feel they would. And of course the All Blacks and Boks are set to be on a collision course at the quarter-final stage, which is still a mind-blowing way the draw was done. But that's for another day. In terms of, for Robertson himself, what could be the next move? This is the big question, of course. He's still a really highly touted coach and really well respected around the game. And if he was to go into the club circles, there are some big clubs on the lookout, or should we say clubs that need regeneration but have the potential to be big clubs. The first one, which was immediately linked by plenty of people in the media, was the Newcastle Red Bulls. Of course, they have that money coming in from Red Bull, and they've been ripping off the signings. We touched on that previously in another video, and we'll touch on it a little bit later in terms of who they've signed again later on in this video. So for me, Newcastle make a lot of sense. They're going to be looking for a big name coach. Would Scott Robertson consider them with what it feels like a blank checkbook within a obviously salary cap system? Could well do. So that was a really interesting one. Then there is, of course, the Hollywoodbets Sharks. Obviously, Razors are a renowned surfer. You might love that Durban lifestyle. But more importantly, the Sharks are full of Springboks, and that's not going to change anytime soon, especially with Thomas Francis coming home next year to Durban and a few other big signings set to come back. Stefan Levis, from Harlequins is also signed there. So the Sharks don't look like they have any signs of slowing down on the signing front, and they really need someone to reinvigorate them because in hard truth is that they're probably the most disappointing club in professional rugby at the moment for the quality they have. They're pretty much never real contenders in the URC or Champions Cup. But Razor's proven with the Crusaders that he can run a club season, so that would be a fascinating one. Then the third choice would be Perpignan. Scott Robertson played there between 2003 and 2006. He knows the area very well. Perpignan was historically one of the biggest clubs in European rugby, but they are struggling in the top 14 at the moment. They are second from bottom. They do have the caveat of Everitt potentially joining them if they survive in the top 14, so that's a player Robertson knows really well and by all accounts really rates, and I'm sure that the respect is mutual on that side of things. So could Robertson go there and be in the top 14 and really sort of, maybe learn in a different environment? This doesn't have to be the end of Scott Robertson in New Zealand rugby. Perhaps he just needs to do what other coaches like Clayton McMillan are doing right now and go to Europe and compete in different leagues, get different IP from around the world, and bring it back to New Zealand rugby. Could he be All Blacks coach again down the line? Why not? He's still young enough, and if he gets enough experience, then perhaps that's certainly an option there. In terms of international jobs, there doesn't seem to be all that much coming up. In terms of Scotland, if that was to be a thing where Gregor Townsend stepped aside, you'd have to expect Franco Schmidt from the Glasgow Warriors to be first in the queue there. But maybe Razor's an option there. Wales have signed, obviously have a new coaching ticket in there in terms of Steve Tandy. But with a really bad Six Nations, and if they kind of stay winless for quite a while, how much patience will he be shown? Who knows? Personally, I'd love to see him get a real crack at it. He understands Welsh rugby, he understands the fabric. But those are sort of the only two real options I can see for Razor at this standpoint. Of course, if he was to wait to 2027, post the World Cup, there is going to be several jobs coming up. Ireland are set to be either renewing Andy Farrell or maybe going down the Ronan O'Gara route or some other route. Maybe Robertson links up with O'Gara and we get that with the Irish team. That would be quite exciting for an Irish fan like myself. But enough on the Scott Robertson news. Again, All Blacks fans, let us know your thoughts. Was he hard done by? Who should be the next head coach? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. In terms of other news, I'm just going to fly through this because there's been some big transfers in professional rugby this week. None more so for a Munster fan like myself. Jean Kleyn, who's been a great servant to the province, is moving on. He will be going to Gloucester Rugby next season. This is a really tough one for Munster Rugby. Again, kind of similar to Antoine Frisch, where perhaps even more extraordinary, obviously, with Kleyn, where he was an Irish international, therefore was an Irish player within the Munster setup, meaning we could have Eli Snyman there. Obviously, Snyman had to depart because Kleyn went on to play for the Springboks. Who can blame him? He went on to win the Rugby World Cup in 2023, but he became a non-Irish qualified player. And in the second row position, Munster Rugby have plenty of depth there at the moment in terms of homegrown talent coming through. Edmund Adogbo, front and centre of that. Evan O'Connell has been phenomenal for anyone who's watched him with Munster A so far this season, and he feels like he'll be the future of that number 5 role. And then you've got Finney Wycherley there. Of course, Ty Burns slots in. And there's plenty of other talent coming through the academy. I know Michael Foy, even though personally I believe he's a blindside flanker long term. So Kleyn to Gloucester next season, where he links up with Dowie Lake and Jack Morgan. So expect the Cherry and Whites to be a very formidable outfit next season. And I would expect a few more signings for them going into next year. Talking about Newcastle, we touched on them a little while ago. And very interestingly, they have signed Raffi Quirke, the very highly touted England international scrum half from the Sale Sharks. Quirke said it was the most difficult decision of his career, which is understandable. But what's building in Newcastle seems really exciting, so he has linked up there with plenty of other big signings. I know Josh Hodge from the Exeter Chiefs has signed there recently, and then of course you've got Hoskin Satutu coming up from the Blues in New Zealand, plus tons of other talent going to Newcastle. So again, they are only going to be more competitive again next season. In terms of the re-signings, there was a really interesting re-signing with Roos staying at the DHL Stormers, which is a great move in my opinion. Roos, for me, if he was in any other country, would probably be in regular match day 23s for the national team. But with the box, such as the depth at the back row position, he hasn't really got that much of a look in recently. But when fit and firing, he's just one of the best ball carriers in the game. So great to see him staying there with John Dobson, and of course Sasha Weinberg and Zulu signed recently, and see Khaleesi is signed for next season. So the Stormers are doing a heck of a lot of work just there. And of course Wilco Lowe, can't forget the big boys up front. Tomas Francis for Wales. The Welsh international is going to go to the Sale Sharks next season. We are led to believe on a deal through to 2028, which is very exciting for the Sharks, who add some much needed firepower in the front row. Obviously, young Asher Kpoku for Jure is the future there, but having someone like Francis backing him up and learning from him will be huge. In the URC, Sean Everitt has re-signed with Edinburgh Rugby. Much just sort of a mixed review. So for Scottish fans, here's one for you. What did you make of Everitt re-signing Edinburgh? They seem to be very inconsistent despite the clear talent in the squad, and I'm not saying that's Everett's fault. It's just an interesting re-signing. It was kind of muted that there might be a new coach coming in there, but Everitt is staying. The South African is staying on board. Now down to France, where Toulon have made two big signings. Let's start with British and Irish Lions and Scotland international star centre Huw Jones. He will be departing the Warriors once again. Obviously, he went away before. He is going down to Toulon, where he will link up with Juan Ignacio Brex, and what will be a very exciting centre partnership from next season. It's a big blow for the Warriors, who've also seen Adam Hastings sign with Montpellier, so quite a bit of change coming up there. But Franco Smith has negotiated this before in terms of Tom Jordan leaving, and he'll handle it again. The Warriors have plenty of talent with young Ollie Smith there and Stafford McDowell. Both have played really well alongside Sione Tuipulotu before, so no major concerns, although you never want to lose a player of quality of Huw Jones. But you know, he's in his 30s now, so getting a nice big deal down in Toulon makes a lot of sense for him. Also in Toulon, now this is probably the biggest signing for what it'll mean in the future. Junior Kpoku, who was the England under-20 star, was reported to be going back to the English Premiership to become eligible for England, and he was initially linked with the Sale Sharks. Obviously, Sarries were always there or thereabouts too on that side of things, but he is joining Toulon. And crucially, he will become eligible for France very soon. I believe it's next season. So for French rugby, it's another huge boost. Obviously for Toulon, it's massive, but Kpoku is international standard and will no doubt be lining out for Les Bleus if he gets that call up. It's a real loss for English rugby, and it kind of, alongside the Willis brothers, makes you question the eligibility laws about playing exclusively in England, being able to play for the national team. So again, probably one for the English fans there. Would you like that law to change? I know as an Irish fan, my personal preference would be that, you know, Ireland had a little bit more flexibility on that to try and maybe clear the pathways, especially in somewhere like Leinster. But, you know, there's obviously reasons why these clauses are in place, but that's a big loss for English rugby. So that is the biggest rugby news today that we have. Again, we'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these points, so drop a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit that subscribe button and like, as it all helps. And enjoy the Investec Champions Cup and EPCR Challenge Cup this week, as well as Japan League One, all live and exclusive on FloRugby, where we have you covered on pretty much all the best club rugby competitions in the world. Thanks again for checking out the video.